Welcome to ESVN, the Emma Sports Vigeland Network show. My name is Emma Vigeland, and you know what to do, folks. Subscribe, youtube.com/ESVN show. You can put on push notifications, so you're aware if we do some last-minute changes, like we got to change the show until after Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals, because doing it on the day of beforehand would make no sense. You can rate us 5 stars on Apple and other podcast platforms, Spotify as well. And by the way, if you become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com, to our parent channel where I talk about politics, I hope everybody in New York has voted today, if you could see my sticker, then you can IM into the show. So if you join the Majority Report, become a member, you can IM into this show, you can IM into the Majority Report, and you can, actually free of charge, say hello to Bradley Alsop.
That comes with a price.
Yeah, well...
on my OnlyFans.
Oh my gosh, wow. So what do you do over there? Probably not too much spicy
feet.
stuff. Just feet.
Just feet.
Just feet. With your shoes on, though.
Yeah, just shoe pics.
Yeah.
Fresh shoe pics. I do have an announcement to make, everyone. It's a rather solemn one.
Okay.
I'm surprising Emma with this, too. It is with a heavy heart that I'm leaving this program because I have received an offer to become the head coach of the New York Knicks.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And I know a bunch of you may be wondering, what other experience besides a podcast producer do you have to coach one of the 32 NBA professional
I mean, were you
teams?
an NBA player?
No, but I feel like the Knicks were just kind of going with the times and adapting to different to new coaching hire practices in light of recent events. So, guys, it's been a great run, and I can't wait for you to see me out there on the sidelines offering my own version of the all offensive foul strategy in the NBA.
Oh, okay. So just basically charging everybody. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's what that'll be.
No flow on either.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I guess you have one out of the two of the qualifications that JJ Redick has, but I'm mixed on that story. We'll get to that after, because last night we've just got to jump right into it. I think. Of course. I mean, what an amazing Stanley Cup playoff run! I think just a lot of it. There were some blowouts and there were fewer upsets. I think like the Final Four outside of the Oilers, all of the teams that remained were top seeds. I mean, the Panthers, division winners. The Panthers won their division. The Rangers won their division. The Dallas Stars won their division. The Oilers were the only one to make it to the Final Four that hadn't. So some people were disappointed that it wasn't more of what we saw last year with the Panthers, a bottom wild card seed, kind of going on a barn burner and making it all the way. But I like seeing the best of the best. So for me, I do think that the quality in these NHL playoffs just shows how we really are in an era of this sport where I know that the NHL and hockey in general has been around for longer than most professional sports leagues. I mean, the NHL, I guess, was in the 1920s. When it took over the Stanley Cup, but it had been running for decades prior to that. It's a very old sport, but I think that the level of athleticism and the skill that we're seeing, we're kind of in the era of, like, I would say McDavid is akin more to Michael Jordan than LeBron. Although maybe that's not accurate because you can make a case that Gretzky is Michael Jordan. But I think that there's still another level where the NHL is a little bit behind in terms of athleticism and skill that they can still reach to get to like the pinnacle of the NBA. I don't think, who knows what the future holds, but I still think there's a lot of growth for the NHL, and it's growing as we speak in the way that these games look, in how fast these guys are, and the plays that are being set up, and in the excitement, in the fortitude, in the level of intelligence that the players are showing. And the cap can hopefully go up and up, and perhaps the NHL, when it can start to decide, like, hey, maybe we don't need to behave in a way that is reminiscent of like a college frat. We can try to open ourselves up to the possibility of showing our personalities to make our sport more marketable. That kind of thing I'm hoping is starting to happen. Alanis Morissette singing that Game 7 last night. That was a pretty great get for them. I saw the NHL was hiring some influencers to come and show off the sports. Like, they're trying. They still have a ways to go. But, last night, it really lived up to the hype. I thought that the Panthers would win in 5. They did not. They really gave their fans a heart attack, but they paid off with an incredible Game 7 performance. In Games 5 and 6, the Panthers looked slow. They looked unsure of themselves. They stopped being able to basically sustain their forecheck, which is the number one elite part of their game. And the Oilers basically had allowed their skill to take over the game. The Panthers seemed to tire themselves out from checking in the offensive zone so hard that they weren't. When they tired out, the Oilers were able to capitalize in Games 5 and 6, and they ran up the score. And the Panthers don't have the ability to make plays in space in the way that the Oilers skills guys do, but they do have enough skill, and all of their players, for the most part, can make you feel something when they hit you. And I think that that really won out in the end, because there were some statistics about this particular Game 7 that showed that, here we go. Yeah, the Florida had tallied 30 hits, and Edmonton had 19. And then the Panthers had 4 more block shots than the Oilers, and they also had the takeaway advantage, which was not the case for Games 5 and 6. But before I dive into some of the more specifics of the game, what was your take watching last night?
Well, we had sort of discussed this earlier off mic, which was that just based on how these games had gone, it really seemed as if it's one thing to think that the momentum would be obviously squarely in the Oilers' side of things because of winning 3 straight games, but I think it's hard also to definitively establish that will carry over into what is, for all intents and purposes, outside of, I think, literally Vladimir Tarasenko, because he was in the last Stanley Cup Game 7 against the Bruins in 2019.
Right. God, that was so fun too.
Yeah, it would be an awesome series. But there's the fact that he
I was rooting so hard for the Blues.
Oh yeah, that was the team of destiny, honestly. But
yeah.
The basically one player on the ice having that type of experience. I think that
Nico Mikkola was also on that team, but did not have his name on the cup because he was injured. So he came over in that trade to the Rangers 2 years ago with Tarasenko, came over from the Blues,
and now they're
both on expiring contracts. They didn't end up re-signing with the Rangers, obviously. Went to Florida. Well, Nico Mikkola signed as a free agent to Florida.
And then
1-year deal for Tarasenko in Ottawa. He was basically he took as much money as he could, and on a 1-year deal, and he was like, okay, well, you can trade me at the deadline. And then they reunited and won it for real together, which I thought was great because
that's nuts. I didn't even realize the Mikkola connection.
Nico Mikkola, another Finnish player. We'll get to King Finn, Sasha Barkov in a second. My mom is actually in Finland right now, visiting some of our family. Not to give out her assassination coordinates, but I texted her.
Suspended.
She's having the time of her life. I texted her this is the first Finnish captain to ever win the Stanley Cup. It's a very small country and they love hockey. I'm like, are they going to be celebrating? No answer. She's just partying it up with my uncle and her husband. All right, have fun.
All right, let me know
with our and our family members. But go on.
But what I was thinking about in that context is I just wasn't certain how much the momentum could carry over, only because it's one. It's a pretty exceptional circumstance. It's a winner-take-all game. It's the last game of the season. And I think what they were also saying on the broadcast is, the latest this has also gone into June. It's just, everything is sort of, you were on the precipice of, literally the final outcomes of this NHL season. And you're going back to a crowd that, by virtue of both winning the first 3 games and then losing the next 3, as you were saying, are probably borderline hysterical in terms of how the energy going into that building. It was you could feel it, but it was tear the roof off frantic in there. And also, not for nothing, there was a large contingent of Oilers fans as well who were representing, surprisingly, Edmonton to Orlando, basically, to be there for Game 7.
Yeah, the Florida fans, I think, got called out a little bit because the Oilers in Edmonton, it was just so raucous that they were like, well, what's with our arena, right? And so they came with a vengeance, and you could really hear it from Alanis Morissette on.
Yeah, I mean, which was, a truly crazy pull for hockey. I love to see it.
I know, and then they were singing...
for both anthems, Canadian and Star Spangled Banner.
But there was a lag, and so I was like, your guys are going to mess her up. Like, you're not on beat. But anyway,
yeah, it's like, stop singing along. Let Alanis cook.
Yes.
But so with all that being said, I also was just thinking in terms of kind of the framing where it was like, where I was thinking to myself after doing some reading and like kind of reflecting on the games, was like, the Panthers stylistically would win in a much closer kind of like hand-to-hand combat, proverbially, style game.
When you make the ice smaller.
Right. Whereas if the Oilers were able to pounce on them with, for example, like hypothetically, like 3 goals in the first period, I would struggle much harder to think that the Panthers would be able to come from behind relative to the Oilers.
Yeah.
So when it was 2-1 after when Reinhart scored that goal, to me, I was like, they have the goal advantage now. Now they can basically do what they do best, which is like the version of like an enormous like boa constrictor, like slowly but surely like consuming its prey.
That's a good analogy for it. And they are statistically one of the best teams in the NHL, if not the best. I don't have it off the top of my head, in the third period going in with a lead like that.
Right,
yeah.
and also as you were saying, like very, it also seemed quite clear through different series, but I think especially in the first 3 games that after a slow start, they continued to just sort of like become more powerful as the game continued.
Right, because they wear you down physically with their forward group as well as some really phenomenal defensive plays. Can we play this radio call? Let's play. I mean, this is one of my...
We'll keep the picture off,
We'll keep the picture off. So we don't want to get dinged for any...
Get struck.
For, showing sports, God forbid. This was the radio call that... I love these, right? And you hear this in the NFL because you don't get home announcers anymore on these national broadcasts, but you do get them when you get the radio call. This was WQAM in South Florida in the final seconds, 19 seconds left and the Panthers were on their way to winning the Stanley Cup.
Fans to their feet. Bouchard has missed Draisaitl. Down to our right. Forsling in the corner. He'll try and hold this. 10 seconds left. 2-1 Panthers. A dream 30 years in the making is a reality. Whoa! The Florida Panthers have won the Stanley Cup.
Lord Stanley is coming home. You always will have a place in South Florida.
Goosebumps. People can't see.
The Panthers have won the Stanley Cup for the first time in franchise history.
Yeah!
Start the celebration, South Florida. The Panthers have done it.
Stanley Cup champions!
The Florida Panthers.
All right, we got it.
Panthers
I mean, the level of elation. Can you imagine after losing 3 straight? That was over a week. That was like a week and a half in between. And the last time that the Panthers had a lead was in Game 3, which was the last game that they won. They had not been up in games 4, 5, or 6, and they finally do it.
And
Game 7.
And what I was also we weren't able to show the video obviously, but what this call was also emblematic of this entire Panthers team. Honestly, from both, there was a slight difference in team makeup because Paul Maurice even mentioned it in his remarks after the game, their Panthers head coach, that he referenced Eric Stahl and Radko Gudas and a few other players who were no longer on the team, and he was like, "This is for them too." And which is the man is a national treasure.
He's
Paul
such
Maurice.
a weirdo.
He is a real, obviously hockey freak, but I couldn't believe how deferential and how humble and sober he was about winning this, and after almost 40 years coaching
26 seasons as an NHL head coach, and this is his first Stanley Cup victory.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
To go so long, to go over 2.5 decades to achieve this. But The reason I say that is because the identity, I think, was similar despite maybe minor roster tweaks for the Panthers from last Cup to this Cup.
Mm-hmm.
But what is so emblematic here is just even in the last 10 seconds of Game 7 of the Stanley Cup, where, like, for the most part, it was not as if it would be in hand necessarily, but, like, to see these guys swarming on a puck and just attaching it to the boards.
Yeah.
Like, you could see in this Game 7, and I understand playing this opponent, but also needing to play from behind for the entire series until this game, and then being down 1 goal and being incapable of getting it into the net. The Oilers were exhausted.
Oh, well, McDavid was exhausted. That's why he didn't have 2 points in the last few games. And I just want to run through some of the more specifics about the game, because I wrote down a bunch of notes last night. I wrote down, Florida came back out looking much stronger on the forecheck than before, as I mentioned. They were able to simplify things and not let the skill of the Oilers take over, which was the key for them winning the Stanley Cup in this series the entire time. The Panthers did go on the power play really early on, and they have struggled. It's frustrated them to a point where I think it's caused them to make some really poor decisions that led to 2 breakaway goals, 2 shorthanded goals, I should say, by the Oilers in this series, which really turned the tide against them in those games 4, 5, and 6. I'm forgetting which ones they were in, but they struggle on the penalty or on the power play there, but they didn't make egregious mistakes, even though it did look like a strong kill by the Oilers. And then right a second after it ended, you had a shot in from Rodriguez, who I think was really phenomenal this playoffs and not really talked about enough, and Carter Verhaeghe, who has been a monster this entire playoffs. He deflected the shot in, and it was 1-0. But then, within a short period of time, Janmark on the Oilers scores on a breakaway off a great feed by Cody Ceci, who has not had a good playoffs, but came back a little bit stronger towards the end of this series. 1-1, easy. Felt like, okay, the Oilers' answer took a lot of the wind out of the sails of the Panthers, and they have a real shot going into the second period. But then it just changed. You saw the life and the leave the eyes of the Oilers, and this exhaustion kind of set in, and their defense took over. They make a mistake, which is what the Panthers have been doing this entire time. The Oilers made a mistake, and Reinhart has a play off the rush, and it's a defensive lapse and a snipe. I think he went top shelf on Stuart Skinner, who, by the way, really did step up in this playoffs, and he had some games where he played much better than I anticipated and better than Oilers goaltenders have had in the past. I want to say that I think Chris Knobloch has done a lot of really good things with this team and deserves credit in the way that he's coached them up, but it was just Bobrovsky in the third period, who I would not have given the Conn Smythe. McDavid would have been my second vote because I like when it's the team that won. I'll talk about Barkov in a bit, but Bobrovsky, when he is clutch, he it's an up and down experience with him. But when he's clutch as hell. And
that one scrum I think we were talking about earlier, where Forsling was also kind of crucial to getting his stick on the that was when the Oilers, to your point, were in the second or third period, we're basically okay, we have to actually cut any sort of stagnation from our attack and just be as aggressive as humanly possible, pushing the puck into the Panthers zone. And that, I think, that instance, they had 3 or 4 shots that a lesser goalie, but not only a lesser goalie, a lesser team in terms of creating screens and having those sets ready to go, that even if they break down, you are ready to basically put your entire body and stick on the line to not let the puck go over the line. When that instance happened, I was like, I don't really know how the Oilers are going to score another goal.
Yeah, and Gustav Forsling...
They suffocated them.
Gustav Forsling would have been... I mean, I say that Bobrovsky... If I was to do a ranked choice, which I believe you give your top 3 for the Conn Smythe, it probably, for me... basically, I think it is a ranked choice voting situation. You do.
Oh, is it actually?
Yes, I'm not joking. I wasn't joking.
I thought you were making New York City politics.
Yeah, no. You give 3, you rank them, and that's counted into the voting total. So McDavid ran away with it, and, I will get into that in a sec, actually, because he is very deserving. But Gustav Forsling would have been my third vote, because, I mean, what a great story 5th-round pick who struggled to stay in the NHL most of his career. He was in and out of the minors with the Blackhawks. You know, he's a skilled defenseman who doesn't impose himself on you physically. But a lot of the advanced analytics show, and that's why, you know, the analytics love a guy like Adam Fox, for example. A lot of the advanced analytics show that you don't necessarily need to be the hardest hitting guy to be a strong defender at this point in the NHL. And I think Forsling is just a prime example of that. He was one of the 3 or 4 best players on the Panthers this series, the entire playoffs, bar none. And, you know, he had a long journey to getting to Florida where he finally was able to sign an extension after being in and out of the AHL, placed on waivers after being traded to the Hurricanes. So I just was really happy for him. And I think he made one of the 3 critical plays of the game outside of a goal scoring play where he, as you mentioned, not that you would have heard it on the ESPN broadcast. They mentioned it one time, showed one replay, and then moved on. It was like the most critical defensive play of the game. And they didn't say anything about Forsling with minutes to go putting his stick on the puck to screw McDavid over when he was right in front of Bobrovsky.
It's only a slight sidebar, but we were talking about this earlier in the day, which is just that the kind of like classic, you know, example of the somewhat, you know, lacking emphasis on such a momentous occasion in the NHL is definitely belied by kind of what I saw as a little bit of a lackluster broadcast for ESPN, and that I think there are a number of hockey analysts and a number of people who would be keen on improving it. But the thing is, cynically, in my view, I just have no idea if ESPN is actually interested in doing that.
They only care about it being for beginners. That's why while play is going on, in the Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals, they're doing long diatribes about the career history of Paul Maurice. It's like, you've done this 7 times before in the series so far, or in the playoffs so far. Why do we have to do this now when you're not doing play-by-play and you're cutting to the bench? And I'm sorry, PK Subban, I'm not even biased, Mark Messier, that duo sucks.
No, they're
sucks. Messier has no charisma. You were saying that earlier.
They have different problems. Like, Messier is a charisma sink. Like,
and PK Subban is trying to be like the NHL's version of Pat McAfee, and I don't find it interesting at all.
He doesn't. Besides, from someone who was such a great player in his prime, like,
a dirty player, but a good player. Yes,
he does not offer a ton in the way of analysis, other than like the initial point he's making, which, to your point, is a quite McAfeean quality, which is you have the same point, but you make it 6 to 8 times in a row.
And this, and you do it when you're trying to be funny, but it really doesn't hit. McAfee is more naturally funny than PK Subban, and I don't like Pat McAfee. Okay, so but it's the same thing. ESPN has this problem that isn't just related to the hockey coverage. TNT is better with their panel for hockey coverage by a lot. ESPN's Monday Night Football is an inferior product to the other broadcasts like Sunday Night Football or even the Fox America's Game of the Week when it comes to the NFL. Basketball, it's not. I mean, basketball, it's a little better because they have some color commentators who I like, but it's still about, you know, flashiness and drama versus actual analysis. Anyway, that's a real aside. That's not about the hockey but it really did bother me. And if you got to watch the Sportsnet broadcast in Canada, good for you. So that it really, I just wanted to shout out Forsling there, Carter Verhaeghe, Evan Rodriguez. Those guys are not necessarily going to be making a ton of headlines, but they were so instrumental to this puck run. But
it's also just a testament to these other people on the team, as you're saying, going down the line where it's like Luosterainen, Lomberg, Montour, even the newer guys like Tarasenko and Kyle Okposo. I mean, newer in the sense of like newer to the team, but like obviously grizzled vets in their own right. But every person, Lundell as well, like so many of these guys, while maybe, as you're saying, would be potentially less heralded as like Matthew Tkachuk or Barkov or Bobrovsky.
Only one goal in this playoffs for Tkachuk, and they still won.
Yeah, and that goes to show you just across the entire roster how built-in that ethos is, how hard every one of these guys played, and how excellently they carry out what they do best.
Yep.
So it was like, it's interesting to see, obviously, after, you know, pushing it to the brink, them just getting right back into stasis and doing exactly what they do so well and just putting it away like convincingly with a very narrow margin of error.
Credit to Maurice for that reason. As you mentioned earlier, Paul Maurice, he lost to they lost to the Vegas Golden Knights in 5 games, so he didn't win the cup then, but he has had 26 seasons as a head coach in the NHL. This is his first Stanley Cup win. This is the first win in franchise history for the Florida Panthers. They were created when the league expanded in the 93-94 season. They went to the Cup in 96. It was their 3rd year in the NHL, but the Colorado Avalanche swept them. There were a few Stanley Cup sweeps, I think, in the mid to late 90s that probably the NHL didn't love, but the the Florida Panthers are actually younger than the last time a Canadian team has won the Cup.
Which is astonishing. There are a few.
That was the season the Rangers last won the Cup. So the Rangers have won a Cup one season more recently than the last Canadian team, which was the Montreal Canadiens winning in the 92-93 season.
That's crazy. It's also crazy to think because, like, I think sometimes when people, I think even like for example, my dad, who's like not a
real hockey
huge
fan.
hockey fan, I was telling him about the Stanley Cup and what was going on with Game 7. He was like, the Panthers are good.
Yeah,
and I was like, it's not. I think just that people don't realize that they're good if you're a casual or even like a very tertiary hockey follower, but it's kind of remarkable. I think if you told the people about a team called the Florida Panthers that is a hockey team that plays in Sunrise, Florida, they would have thought it was established in like 2011.
Oh, yeah.
And like this is their 30th season. Like they've actually been around for a surprising amount of time. They've just been so, rendered irrelevant by average to middling and mediocre play and being in Florida. But now with everything that this team has done, they've been made to be a force to be reckoned with and to be like considered. Like you have to acknowledge a team that has gone to back-to-back Stanley Cup finals and actually won this one.
I mean, so since 2020 we had the bubble winners, which were the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Right, like Florida hockey is ascended.
Then in 21 they won it back-to-back. Then we had the Avalanche, then the Vegas Golden Knights, and the Florida Panthers made it to the finals that year, and then they just won it again. These are all So
4 of 5 last Stanley Cups have had Florida team, or 3 of 5?
3 out of 5.
That's still crazy.
But still, all North American teams, and and not necessarily teams that you would think have this storied history or something like the Boston Bruins. So,
it's a new era in a way. I think
it's a new era
of like what teams are becoming more prominent and more recognizable, and because by necessity, like you have to acknowledge
and they need to do a better job at marketing this, but you got to give it to Gary Bettman, at least in this way. It has been a success in terms of expanding the league. I mean, the fact that the Golden
now there's
Knights,
hockey culture in Florida for whatever, if it seems inexplicable at some point, fair enough, but now because of, as you're saying, expanding there's a Stanley Cup in South Florida.
Exactly. And it helps the Lightning and it helps the Panthers that they do not have to pay income tax on those contracts.
It's probably not the worst thing in the world for some Eastern European or Russian or Scandinavian players to then spend their time in either Orlando or Tampa.
Oh my gosh, they're like, this is so much better than wow, wherever the hell I'm from.
The sun is out all the time, constantly.
Speaking of players who may not be used to the sun being out all the time, although in the summer right now the sun sets at like 10 p.m. in Finland. Sasha Barkov, let's put up the Jay Fresh had these advanced analytics on Sasha Barkov in this series from a defensive standpoint, which doesn't necessarily get the credit that it should. But Jay Fresh here, this was ahead of Game 7, says, if Florida loses tonight, no one will remember anything positive about their Stanley Cup final performance, but if they win, it should be a legacy-defining performance from Alexander Barkov, whose work against the best player in the world this series has been something special. And you can see here, if we could just zoom in, McDavid, the green is good, the red is bad when Barkov is on the ice. And I also want to give Forsling credit because this chart doesn't show it, but there are other charts that show that basically Paul Maurice was whenever McDavid was on the ice, he'd send out the Forsling pair, and he'd send out Barkov's line. But you just see noticeably that, on the ice, 5v5, when Barkov was on the ice, McDavid had a much, much more difficult time. And Barkov was also tied for 4th in the NHL playoffs in terms of points put up. So he was one of the best offensive players in the Stanley Cup Finals, bar none, in the playoffs this year. And he was also an incredible defender, and it wasn't just on McDavid's line. Part of how the Florida Panthers kept advancing was they would send out Barkov against the top lines for the Tampa Bay Lightning with Kucherov, for the Boston Bruins with Patrice Bergeron, and then for the Rangers, he was often on the ice with Mika Zibanejad until, Zibanejad struggles against top centers, whether it be Crosby or Barkov, but he also would send out on occasion to shut down the Trocheck Panarin line during that series. And then when it came to the best player in the world, look at those advanced metrics there. Barkov was just phenomenal. And so, look, I get it. McDavid is only the 6th player in the history of the NHL to win the Conn Smythe, which is meaning you're the best player in the playoffs. When they were on the losing team in the Stanley Cup Finals, the last time was Jean-Sébastien Giguère. I forget if it's a hard G or soft G, but he was the goalie of the Ducks in 2003, and they ended up losing that series. But McDavid's only the 2nd non-goalie to ever win the Conn Smythe in a losing effort in the Stanley Cup Finals, but the last time was Reggie Leach in 1976, so it's quite rare. McDavid had 42 points in 25 Stanley Cup playoff games, but he also had 0 points in games 6 and 7. And I know that McDavid was just exhausted at that point, and specifically at the end of Game 7, they just weren't taking him off the ice. And I thought they should have called a timeout, to be honest, to give those guys a little bit of rest so they could pull Skinner and maybe have a bit of a better shot, because those guys, they couldn't skate.
And it was becoming clear, because also I think two of the other tough things for the Oilers that was as you mentioned briefly, Cody Ceci as well, but also Bromberg. Their defense was definitely struggling to not only not turn the puck over, but also just stay in front of guys and not kind of botch rotations and things like that. It was kind of that was, the wheels were coming off a little bit defensively, and I also think the best I think adjustment that Knobloch made after the first period was to basically just shorten the lines.
Yes.
Because I think he was having the 4th line come out relatively frequently, to the point where it was we actually can't. We have to tighten it up so that we're not losing this much advantage or leverage in these moments. And that was when the offensive chances started really getting going for the Oilers.
Right.
It's not just a testament. I think it's a testament to how well the Panthers played defensively, because in the second and third periods, I thought the shots that the Oilers were creating and getting, and some of the second efforts they were getting, were legitimately good. If there's another bounce or whatever the case may be, even I think Bouchard had one that hit the post hard. If that's an inch to the right, it goes in the goal.
Yeah.
There's obviously always a little bit of luck, but it's just that how dogged that defense was made it so that even shots that maybe in a different circumstance would go in, they didn't have nearly as much of a chance.
Yeah. So McDavid, of course, deserving. I'm not somebody that believes in giving the MVP to a team that didn't lose.
No,
that
I
didn't
understand.
win. Maybe I'm old school like that. I know that it's about the entirety of the playoffs, but because of Barkov's performance, I just think people sometimes don't recognize defense in the same way they do putting up points. And as an overall player, I mean, I'm hard-pressed to think of a player I would want more on my team.
And it's not as if he wasn't scoring or contributing on the offensive end either, in terms of point totals.
Yeah, as I mentioned, he's tied for 4th in the playoffs.
Right, and assists, goals too. He was playmaking and scoring.
So
kind of the full package in
my view.
Yeah.
He had 22 points in 42 games. He was tied with Tkachuk on his own team. Tkachuk was scoring much more in the previous series.
Right.
McDavid, obviously, it was 25 games as opposed to 20. Oh wait, sorry, I say 42 games.
Yeah,
24.
yeah.
I meant. So 22 points in 24 games for Barkov. The Oilers played 25 games, and McDavid had 42 points in 25 games.
Like,
so
that is so unbelievable.
like the high 1 point. I can't do that off the top of my head, but 1.7, 1.8 points per game. Is that what he was averaging? So I get it. It's absurd. That's not I wouldn't give the Super Bowl MVP to somebody who lost a game. What the last time that happened was a Cowboys player in the 60s or something like that. It's just not necessary. I wonder when the last time that was in the NBA, if that's even happened. Well, it has happened before.
So I feel similarly in the sense that I agree with you in that regard of I think the MVP, so to speak. I know Conn Smythe is a little bit more comprehensive than Finals MVP or Super Bowl MVP.
It feels like such a relic for the NHL, right?
Totally. And I think only in somewhat exceptional circumstances, maybe McDavid would qualify for that in my view, just because of how extraordinary his playoff run was.
Right.
But the only other time I could even consider is the 2017 or 2018 finals when basically Andre Iguodala got a consolatory Finals MVP for LeBron averaging 39 points against him as his primary defender.
Here we go.
And to me, it's LeBron probably just should have won that MVP.
Yeah.
That's the only other one I can even think of because because Iguodala got that, and to his credit, you're basically trying to stop like a bull in a china shop. That's not easy to do. Even relegating him to that many points was a very, very difficult effort. But I just feel like LeBron, in spite of everything, played so well in that series that's really the only one where I was if they gave the Finals MVP to LeBron James despite the Warriors winning, I could understand that.
People point that in articles that in the 2015 NBA Finals, LeBron could have gotten it. People, there was also talk about it when the Suns were up 2-1 against the Bucks, and then the Bucks ended up coming back for Giannis to get it because he was clearly the best player on either of those teams. But still, I wouldn't have liked that then. The last time it's happened in the NBA is Jerry West winning it in 1969. Yeah, after the Lakers lost to the Celtics in 7 games. So there's some precedent, but I just still not necessarily my style. I think it's also. McDavid probably wants to throw it into the sea. The idea that he has this award, that the definition of a Pyrrhic victory for him, he doesn't give a crap about this. Do you think he even wants to look at that trophy? Ridiculous.
They asked him about it, and honestly, his response was so unbelievably devastating. He was just
it's almost cruel to give it to him.
I literally thought the same thing. I was it's actually almost more of a punishment to give him the Conn Smythe after going 3-0 to 3-3 to 4-3 in a losing effort and then winning the Best Player award.
Yes, it's just not. It's cruel.
You could literally hear him almost choke back a sob, but he was like, "Yeah, it's It's an honor, and there are a lot of great names on that trophy, but
oh my God, that's actually pretty damn good. McDavid impression also, probably a good impression for just 20% of the NHL.
Yeah, he's just they're like, hey, what do you think about winning the Conn Smythe? He was like, sorry, what?
It's a good team effort. Good team effort. We play as hard.
Hockey speak while choking back incredible sadness.
Just wasn't enough.
We do have a great group of guys.
But you witness a little Kachuk in his post game interview when he was tearing up and things like that. When they actually won the cup, they start to show a little bit of personality.
Well, you could also just tell, right, when Kachuk,
show this all the time.
When Kachuk, when it kind of dawned on Kachuk / when he held the trophy, and same thing with Maurice too. It's so funny to see with a big trophy, which let's be real, the Stanley Cup is a freaking awesome trophy. It's really cool.
By far.
It's just
the best trophy ceremony.
Regal, it's But
the tradition of every player skating around with it and holding it up, better than the Super Bowl trophy, I think, award ceremony, better than the NBA. They don't have any of that. Everyone just goes on stage and accepts the trophy.
With the cup.
I like that part of it.
But to me, what I was saying with Kachuk and Maurice is you could tell for both of them in a number of ways that I don't even mean to say it seems childlike. I more mean it seems when they held the cup, there actually seemed to be an exhibition of a real unfettered, cathartic,
raw emotion
of I'm sitting with this thing that I've dreamed of my entire life, and it's now in my hands. And seeing that, literally, I'm talking about it, that gives me chills to think about. You've worked that hard for this your entire life.
Right.
And it's now made tangible in your hands in the form of something that you're rewarded with physically, as opposed to just like the adulation of winning.
Right. Exactly.
And this I wanted to flag two things before we can move on. But unbelievable that two kids that used to sit on the bus together going to school in St. Louis, Missouri, and Matthew Tkachuk and Jason Tatum
absolutely
are both champions in their respective sports in the same year. Like that
picture
nuts.
of them is so great. Yeah, from the school bus.
But then on the other side of things, I did just want to highlight that Corey Perry is the first player in NHL history to lose in the Stanley Cup final 4 times in 5 years.
All on different teams. All on different teams.
On the Canadians, the Stars, the Lightning, and the Oilers. I mean, I don't even know how that's possible.
With the Canadians one, you're like, okay, it's a bubble one. That doesn't really count, right? I'll get him next year. No, you won't. No, you won't. Corey Perry is a veteran. At the very least, that statistic is less horrifying when you realize he won the cup in Anaheim.
Yes, right. And also,
in 2007.
Right, I was going to say, and also it goes to show, he won the cup, literally almost 20 years ago.
I mean, and so...
he's that old. He's played...
2007 is almost 20 years ago.
He's played so long. That was 17 years ago.
Right, and so thankfully for him, he does at least have that experience, but still absolutely horrible that he had to go through that 4 times in the last 5 years.
He just turned 39.
Yeah. This is probably it for him.
So he won the Stanley Cup with the Ducks when he was 22 years old. Yep. That is insane.
Insane.
And he's been back that many times since, probably as better player, more experienced teammate. It just never happened.
Never.
Just when he was an actual sprightly young guy in a field of veterans who have been retired for maybe some of them 20 years by now almost.
And it's also crazy to think that's basically the last time the Ducks were relevant.
Oh my God, yeah, absolutely. The last time
17 years ago.
It was literally 17 years ago.
And I just got to say, I don't know what Draisaitl's future is in Edmonton. He did not play well. He did not play well. He did not play well in this series. And he's a phenomenal player. He really is. But I do think we're seeing a little bit of how a player's statistics when you're on a power play unit with Connor McDavid. I know that they're centers on different lines, but they get jumbled together on occasion and they play on the same top unit. They can get padded a little bit. So Draisaitl, I'm not exactly sure what his contract situation is. I believe it's up next year. If I'm not mistaken. I'm going to look that up as we speak. Do a little bit of... 8 years. He signed it... so he has 1 more year on his deal. If he makes it clear that he's not going to re-sign with Edmonton, he could be traded. It just depends. And we're already seeing, for some reason, the NHL pick up in off-season activity. It already started before the end of the Stanley Cup playoffs. You had Barclay Goodrow being placed on waivers and going to the San Jose Sharks. You had Ullmark being traded to the Ottawa Senators from the Bruins, who I know he is from Europe, so he wanted to stay on the East Coast. I guess Ottawa is close enough to the coast, so his family could see some of the games. That was some of the issues. I think he was supposed to have gone to LA mid-season last year to make way for Swayman. Make sway for Swayman. What?
Make sway for Swayman.
Make sway for Swayman.
Make sway, man.
We also just saw, what was that? The Wallman was traded to San Jose from Detroit, who's a mid-level defenseman.
Do you think? I feel like there are
to make room for something else, but there's another move to come. But the point is just the NHL. Draw it out for a second just to get your go on.
I meant to say no. It's interesting because as you were saying, the Dubois deal,
Pierre-Luc Dubois,
the Dubois deal so Dubois went from the Kings to
the Capitals after he signed a massive extension.
Right after leaving Winnipeg.
Yes, and he had leaving Columbus after being one of the a top 5 draft pick at that time as well. He's had a lot of destinations, and apparently, I think he might be a difficult player to coach. That seems to be the case,
and probably streaky because had a pretty banner year for the Jets, then goes to the Kings. Now, obviously, I assume the Kings are
Yeah.
We're gonna get that guy, and then we don't get that guy, and then Gabe Vilardi is better for Winnipeg than he was in LA, and Dubois was worse for LA than he was for Winnipeg.
Almost a year ago today, he signed in a sign and trade an 8-year contract, and after 1 year, the Kings have traded him away in exchange for Darcy Kemper, who you know is a decent goaltender, who I know won the Cup with the Colorado, Avalanche, but not necessarily somebody that is like a 1-to-1 talent with Pierre-Luc Dubois, but I think the character concerns seem to be real.
But with the PLD trade, the Ullmark trade, and then you said the Wallman trade, right? Mm-hmm. It makes so those are all kind of, as you said, they were kind of scrunched together right in the midst of the Stanley Cup. But I feel like they're potentially going to be some like.
This could be a fun offseason.
Because I'm wondering. Speaking of the Ducks, I'm actually wondering if they might move from Zegras, which would be very, very interesting to me, just in terms of A, what could they get for Zegras, and B, who would be a good match for him to go to? Because he's so exciting, but I'm wondering who could like utilize him the best way on like a competitive team.
He is a bit streaky, and he's horrible defensively.
That's exactly.
Even his offensive output versus like his highlight reel plays don't necessarily translate to consistency on offense right now, but he's so young. He's really talented. So it's about how a team can evaluate him, and if he wants to go to a contender in that way. But it is pretty sad for the Ducks if they really have to give up
I know already after
their one banner player. No, I know he's like dating a TikTok star from LA too, so I feel like that might be hard for him.
Yeah, he's like, trade me to the Kings.
A la Darren Waller and Kelsey Plum, and we saw how that ended.
But basically, I guess I'm thinking like, he's almost like a trick shot guy to an extent. Like, he's really, really talented, but it's almost like, could he go somewhere and actually be like coached and honed into like a genuinely good full-on NHL player?
Absolutely.
But I guess we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
Great season though. Had a great time all throughout.
Congrats to the Florida Panthers, who I'm not even mad at because they're just really good. And I do feel for the Oilers, but you know, would you rather get swept or would you rather come back 3 games?
No, I feel if I'm an Oilers fan, I feel so much better about, first of all, as you said it earlier, I feel so much better about Stuart Skinner.
Yep.
And not only that, I feel so much better about Evan Bouchard
and Knobloch.
And I feel
Dude, I didn't talk enough about Bouchard. You're right. He is only 24.
That's what I'm saying is like for a guy who was kind of necessary as like a supplementary piece to Draisaitl and McDavid, he played so well. And to say nothing of Zach Hyman, I think
he has the makings of a star defenseman, and he can
totally.
I mean, he had some defensive lapses, but he's shown he had a rocket off the post that could have tied that game.
He's a great all. I think even if there were some defensive lapses when you're 24 years old, and you have a shot like that. Like, I guess for me, I'm thinking with them, I feel so much better to say we went out literally on our shields, basically, proverbially, to end the series. Our coach showed incredible mettle. Our supporting cast showed incredible mettle. Our goalie showed incredible mettle, who we've had inconsistencies and doubts about. So I just think like so many key pieces, and I think the most important thing of what I'm trying to say is that so many key pieces outside of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl showed something.
Exactly.
And if they got swept, we wouldn't have seen any of that.
And they need to make some change. They need to beef up their defense. They probably need to beef up their bottom 6 as well.
Depth I think would do wonders for this team.
They showed some things where
we can build on some of this.
We can build on some.
We can maybe trust Skinner a little bit more. Maybe he can develop a little bit. He's only 27. He's not as old as I thought he was.
Yeah.
And as you said, Bouchard's 24. Like he could even grow to be a supplementary or even like super 1A or 1B option.
1A defenseman, right. And that's what they do need in that. They need a third guy as opposed to Draisaitl and McDavid, especially if Draisaitl is on his way out, which could be the case.
So I'm not super pessimistic, and I wouldn't hang my head too low if I'm the Oilers, because I would so much rather see them show this type of fight to get so close than to, basically just wave the white flag.
Absolutely. Let's just move on to this story, because this is some NBA news. Guess JJ Redick's gonna have to give up podcasting.
He said as much as in his presser. He said, I'm not doing it anymore.
No more mind the game with LeBron because they will be playing the game, or at least LeBron will be playing his game in theory.
When you get what you want from the podcast, you don't need to keep podcasting.
That's right. It's the podcasting. Podcasting for me is a step into riches beyond my
That's why
wildest
we're doing
dreams.
this. Once we get like private jet money, like owning my personal manatee at a huge pool in Montana.
Oh, manatees are so cute. I'll get one first.
But apparently, you know what's horrible about them?
What?
Apparently, you're not supposed to touch them.
That's cruel.
Because if I won the lottery, I would get a huge pool in Montana and own a pet manatee. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Hey, you can pay enough to touch a manatee if once we're done.
I think if I was nice to them and gave them heads of romaine lettuce, I think it would be okay.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, we'll touch on that soon. And I guess Old Man in the 3 is done. He was the first active NBA player. I didn't realize or remember, I guess, that Redick had started this when he was still active in 2016. But he started his own weekly podcast, and it's paid dividends for him. There are so many NBA players that have podcasts now. But Redick, I think, was a really phenomenal analyst and communicator. So I respect his basketball mind just from seeing it. I can't understand sometimes what he's saying because he's just speaking in such technical terms. But I have learned things from JJ Redick. And I think he's a phenomenal communicator. Do I have some questions about this hire? Yes, I mean, he has 0 prior coaching experience except for
his kids who
his 4th grade,
his elementary school Brooklynite children.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I watched his the tour of his house. What was it? Architectural Digest.
Architectural
and he
Digest.
just renovated some townhouse or some place in Brooklyn. It looks amazing. Anyway,
beautiful.
So Brooklyn envy over here. But yeah, I mean, look. It's a little bit concerning, I would say, just because it's LeBron. I don't necessarily wants to be coached at this point in his career in the same way. He wants to be the coach on the floor, and he wants a guy that can coach on the bench and that they can work together almost collaboratively, right? And that I can understand that. But Darvin Ham wasn't the guy, and I guess it's JJ Redick, who has no professional or college coaching experience. This is pointed out here in this segment by Nick Wright. And for somebody who works for Fox, Nick Wright is okay. He has some good takes. I don't understand why we have to be so bombastic when we speak in sports media all the time, but that's the thing over there. He makes some
That's a Nick Wright staple, though, is him being like, and then let me get to this point.
Right. Let him get there, because I think he makes a good case as to why this could be a little bit of an issue.
Since Bird, there have been 9. It'll be easier for the audience to see than you guys, but I'll explain what that says. 9 coaches who had no experience ever get a job like JJ Redick. The only one that won more than 1 playoff series with the team that hired him is Kerr. The only one. So, I mean, Doc Rivers, 3 seasons in Orlando, 0 playoff series. Isaiah Thomas, 3 seasons in Indy, 0 playoff series. Vinny Del Negro, famously, 3 seasons in Chicago, 0 playoff series wins, might have been 2. Mark Jackson, 3 seasons in Golden State, 1 playoff series win. Jay Kidd, 1 season with the Nets, 1 playoff series win. Kerr, 6 and 23, all that stuff. And then Derek Fisher, 2 seasons, 0 playoff series. Steve Nash, 3 seasons, 1 playoff series. So even the ones, Brew, this is why it's such a risk that we're Doc, Jay Kidd. Yep. Oh, those are good coaches. Not for the team that hired them.
Right.
Not until they got, experience.
And they did okay.
They did okay, but it didn't.
Okay is not going to save it.
Okay is not going to save it. Right. So it's just our old, I don't want to quote him because I don't know if he wanted to be quoted. But someone brought this up to me yesterday, and I thought it was a good point. Why has JJ not gotten the Jeff Saturday treatment?
Oh, I can answer that.
Why?
At least football is different.
Oh, because it's just the bar?
It is the hardest of the 3 major sports to coach. I think the coach has much more is a factor in the success. I cannot imagine, and I don't know why the Colts did, that anyone anyone could step out of never coaching to coaching the NFL football. Basketball, it can be done.
So that's why he didn't get the full Jeff Saturday treatment. I guess the reason it piqued my interest was the Jeff Saturday thing was a sign of a totally dysfunctional organization, owner. It was a punchline, right? And the JJ thing is he's going to walk in as an above average coach as far as pay. $8 million a year is more than Missoula makes. Yep. It's more than they were willing to offer Ty Lue.
What was Ham? I thought around 5.
I thought Ham was around 4 and Vogel was around 5. My answer, Danny, is no, he is not.
Yeah, I thought that the Saturday point was pretty devastating, and I think that Chris Broussard is right that NBA coaching is a different skill set than NFL coaching, which is structured almost militaristically. Where, I mean, I think war games are basically the best way to view football, which is that you're tactically lined up as if you're some sort of front, and it's about trying to get to the other side of the field through a series of basically strategic maneuvers where you stop and set it up.
Strategic violence.
Yes, it is strategic violence. The NBA, it's much more about flow. It's about setting things up in transition. It's about defending. It's about getting your guys in the right mindset.
You're not also, to your point slightly, Emma, as well, in terms of like analogizing it to like, military strategy or like chess strategy as an example, just because like every piece moving in certain unison or sort of with a purpose is fundamental. Another thing too is like an NBA coach presumably will draw plays in certain circumstances, but is not calling every play
right
for during the course of a game.
So I do agree that it's not as egregious as Jeff Saturday in that instance,
right,
which was also an impulsive owner trying to put his buddy into the head coaching position, and also replacing Frank Reich, who is a Super Bowl winning coach, with somebody who has never coached before in the history of the NFL or even on the college level. That was insane, and it also did not end very well. But I guess the difference is that JJ Redick is a cool guy. He's easy to, he's handsome. He's like charismatic, and he's friends with LeBron. That's the difference here, as opposed to Jeff Saturday being friends with Jim Irsay, who even amongst the owners in the NFL is kind of persona non grata.
Jeff, I'll slap a large neon blinking allegedly to this statement just for liability purposes, but Jeff Saturday's hiring by Jim Irsay was probably the combination of a few too many cognacs and Percocet on the iPad.
That certainly influenced.
Reading some Twitter mentions. You know what? I will hire him. I will fucking hire Jeff Saturday.
Right, and the other thing is like, okay, the NBA doesn't have a minority coaching problem in the same way that the NFL does, right? But
definitely not.
It does have a problem with having a lot of female coaches who are prominent, who have not gotten the ability to coach NBA teams, and a lot of the times the example that is given, or the excuse, is that they don't have enough experience. But then JJ Redick gets hired by the second now most winningest franchise in the history of the NBA right off the rip, because he's friends with the superstar that's on the team. I don't know, man.
And they're also, and I think what also can be gleaned too is that there isn't, for example, like a parallel professional football league for women where coaching talent would potentially sprout up, or a parallel women's as robust. I feel like they're the most recent professional women's hockey league is trying something, but that's pretty nascent in its development as a league. Whereas, especially with more of the exposure recently by virtue of this recent rookie class and obviously Caitlin Clark, you also see that and from this NCAA tournament, it's like, I'm sorry, like there are some basketball minds in the NBA who are even probably not just either assistant coaches or head coaches where I feel confident in saying this. Don Staley could do that job.
Oh yeah,
Becky Hammon could do that job. Becky Hammon almost did that job.
But that was part of the issue.
She
got a lot of experience under Pop and still never got the opportunity.
Teresa Weatherspoon, C. Vivian Stringer at Rutgers when I believe she's retired now because she's a little bit older, but she certainly there are. Listen, and I don't say this. I don't say this derisively. I'm saying this seriously. There are imperious, intense, strategically minded, genius coaches who are women, and they can draw plays and divine the game of basketball just as well. It doesn't necessarily require a male genitalia to do so.
No, it doesn't.
Well,
crap. Well, that seemed to be the first thing on the resume.
Maybe with an experiment of having a women's NBA coach, we can prove that definitively.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. This is a real gamble, and if I were to guess now how it ends, my guess would be not that great. But I still like JJ Redick, even if I don't begrudge him for taking this opportunity. I do question a little bit what the Lakers.
Yeah, right. If anything, the scrutiny more falls on the Buss family and Rob Pelinka. JJ's taking the job that's offered to him.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I wouldn't turn down $8 million a year either to coach basketball.
And he even said about the Danny Hurley stuff, where obviously there was a bit of a Shams Woj Cold War of Shams previewing the JJ Redick interest from the Lakers and Woj. Indicating that actually, no, they are not considering JJ Redick. And Danny Hurley, UConn coach, back-to-back NCAA championship winning coach, the Lakers are putting together a plan to woo him. And Danny Hurley was like, I'm the king of my school. And I have carte blanche to do literally whatever I want. So you're telling me I'm going to have to deal with adults?
Yeah.
LeBron James, who's 15 years younger than me, as opposed to kids born in 2004, who I can kind of mold in my image to run my style of basketball. No, thank you.
No, thank you.
That's okay.
Speaking of women's basketball, we'll touch on this and then we'll head out here. I don't know if you were able to catch the game on Sunday. I think you were kind of busy, right? You had a party. Did you not? Bradley, people don't realize, is extremely social. And he's always doing things. You had a big party on Sunday where you said, I'm going to be tired on Monday.
My sister got engaged.
Oh, yes. I didn't even ask you how that went.
Yeah, it was great. It was amazing.
Was she surprised?
She was surprised, I think, until she got in a boat, and that was
that's really sweet.
But then we went out with her family, and then also went to
what kind of boat?
Just a little sailboat thing that kind of went around the Hudson, I think. That was just them, her and her fiance, and then
very nice.
Our families got together. Then we surprised her with her friends at a place in the city, which was
really sweet.
It was a fabulous day.
Well, you're gonna have to show me pictures in a second, but I guess you probably did not catch Sunday's matinee game with the Indiana Fever and the Chicago Sky, in which Angel Reese had a career high after being a little bit inflammatory, and after the Indiana Fever had taken up, I think they now have the series. They still have the series lead, but yes, exactly. So the Fever had won the first two. The Sky won by 1 point, and they still have one game to go in late August where they'll reunite once again. Of course, nationally broadcast on ESPN at the time, and it was a really phenomenal showing by Angel Reese. 25 points, 16 rebounds, so she had a double-double there, which I think extends her streak.
She's breaking some rookie record for rebounds or something so far.
Yeah, she has had a double-double in 8 consecutive games at this point.
That's crazy.
It's really awesome, and it also put the Chicago Sky into the final playoff spot, knocking out the Indiana Fever. They're around a little under halfway through the season for the WNBA, but the Liberty currently have the top spot in the WNBA standings. Despite the fact that the Sky and the Fever are getting all these nationally broadcast games, they are not two of the best teams in the WNBA now. They both have losing records, but the Liberty and the Sun are at the top. The Minnesota Lynx are having a really good season, as same with the Seattle Storm, the Las Vegas Aces. Those are the 5 teams that are currently above 500 at this point. But it's a league that needs to expand. There's only 12 teams and there's 8 playoff spots, but they'd be very thrilled if both the Sky and the Indiana Fever make it into the WNBA playoffs. But I mean, it was cool to see A'ja Wilson also. Wait, no, it wasn't A'ja Wilson. I'm sorry. Angel. That's what I meant to say. Angel Reese. It was cool to see Angel Reese really have the best game of her career on a national stage like that, especially because she's been the queen of trash talk about Caitlin Clark in particular, and has just decided, like, I'm going to play the role of agitator in this situation. And she's being performatively an asshole, but I say that with affection. Because that's sometimes how the best of the best actually are. To be honest with you, you think Michael Jordan was a really fun person to hang around with,
right? And that's also, to your point, in a way, I think it's also
to her opponents, I should say, or his opponents.
But I also think it's to your point. It's like sometimes that type of competitiveness, that type of kind of trash talking, braggadociousness, that's almost, I think, somewhat, I think it's slightly intangible or slightly nebulous to make this claim, but I do sometimes think attitude and performance sometimes for certain players specifically really do intersect. Like in fact, like that is almost like also a projection somewhat of confidence of, like, I'm better than you, but also, like, I'm trying to make it very clear that I'm better than you.
Right.
Whereas Caitlin Clark is just a little bit. She's obviously, like, of course, when she's on the court, she's intense and will, like, get in. Is not afraid.
She barks at her teammates.
Right. Is not afraid to kind of, like, make her voice heard, but she's also just a little bit more of, like, she has a bit more of, like, an assassin level confidence of just be quietly chucking up 40-foot 3-pointers and then running back down the end of the floor.
Right. I mean, honestly, it feels like, and I'm much more of a casual viewer. I'm not score watching all the time. But it really does feel like the Fever are kind of a 1-2 punch, and they lack depth with Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark, and that's part of the biggest problem with the team.
There's a reason you picked first overall 2 years in a row.
Right. So I mean, they need to have some more depth on their team, and Chicago is not playing particularly well this year so far. But it was a thriller. I mean, they ended up only winning by 1 point in the end. But
I love this. I there's nothing I love more. This was, like, reminding me of when, for the very, very, very brief moment that some of my NBA fantasies were realized of, when DeMarcus Cousins and Anthony Davis played for the Pelicans for, like, what was probably 35 games. I just love the two towers dynamic. So having Angel Reese and Camila Cardozo playing together is just one of my favorite things to check in on.
Yeah,
because Cardozo is just, like, absolutely, like, she's 6'7", she gets every rebound.
She does,
and she has great touch around the basket. Like, they're like, I can't wait to see those two grow and develop together on the same team.
And Kennedy Carter too. Give her props as well.
She's. I mean, I know. Unfortunately, she got, as we were talking about last week and the week before, she got notoriety for the wrong reasons of bumping hip checking Caitlin Clark. But she's we could even make the comparison. She's kind of Beverly-esque, or in that mold of, like, an extremely pesky defender, strong-willed player, and also can kind of create her own shot, which is huge for a team that needs young, dynamic players, and the Sky are building that type of young core.
Yeah,
there, which
absolutely. The WNBA, has never been better. Gosh, I'm looking at these statistics. I didn't realize in the WNBA regular season that A'ja Wilson right now is the leader in both points and rebounds in the entire league right now for Vegas.
She's not even really that old at this point. I don't even think she's 30 yet.
Yeah.
She's making a very strong case that she's already, like, the best women's player of all time,
yeah.
or at least in the conversation already. Like, she is one. Like, the amount of awards and plaudits she's already won, and she's actually, I think, getting better already. It's insane. Like, she's so good.
Yeah, no, she's phenomenal. Center for Las Vegas, and Sabrina Ionescu for New York, the Liberty here, is tearing it up as well as Brianna Stewart.
This will be an exciting playoffs, I think, with the the obvious Liberty and Aces duo up top, but then the Sun playing pretty well, the Sky playing pretty well, as you were saying, the Lynx playing pretty well, so it'll be
unfortunately
fun.
The Sparks in Los Angeles took a real hit with Cameron Brink tearing her ACL, which was so hard to watch.
Because she honestly, until her injury, I actually think that she had a real case over Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese to win Rookie of the Year. Just like an already pretty excellent defender, and with a pretty well-rounded game for someone at her size, because she's 6'4".
Yeah.
Like I think obviously future is very bright. It's just obviously a huge bummer to see her tear her ACL, and she had to be helped off the court. It was a tough scene, but she seems to be in good spirits, all told, from her social media.
Yeah. And look, again, for all the talk about Caitlin Clark not having a great rookie year, she's really been picking things up. She's now, 4th in average assists in the WNBA right now. And she's 5th in 3-pointers made, which is exactly her game. So she's never going to be somebody that's a lockdown defender. If you want a more two-way player in this rivalry, Angel Reese is your go-to. But I do think that there's a chance that Caitlin Clark does get a little bit stronger as she gets older as well, which could add some different dimensions to her game.
That's just what I was going to say, is also, honestly, if there's a potential for her to honestly embrace or adopt a conditioning / strength regimen where because I'm certain she's quite young, and also she's already a peak athlete. If she had a little bit more mass and muscle, it would make her driving game more effective and more intimidating. It would also make her defense more.
Yeah.
She could be able to absorb more contact while also kind of dishing it out as well. So,
yep.
And she's just a rookie. I think we are going to see, I think, so much more of a dimension of Caitlin Clark beyond just nifty handles and 3-pointers.
But let's be real too. This rookie class has lived up to the hype.
Everyone in their own right has been really, really awesome for the most part.
It's going to be an extremely competitive, and we're not even halfway through the season, Rookie of the Year race in the WNBA for sure.
And also, I wanted to just highlight another Aaliyah Edwards on the Mystics, who is already the Mystics are I think in a lower. I don't think they're playing particularly well. I'd have to double check the standings, but she in UConn was already kind of a plug and play professional kind of grade player, and she's just showing that she's just a Swiss Army knife lockdown defender for the Mystics already. So even someone is a little bit less heralded is still already a plug and play starter in the WNBA.
Absolutely.
It's so cool. And Paige Beckers is coming next, speaking of UConn.
Oh yeah.
And Juju Watkins from USC. It's just we're going to be in an even greater renaissance of women's basketball.
I know. I got to go get to a Liberty game this season. Well, let's read some IMs and then we'll get out of here. How about that? Or is that an imitation of me?
No, it was, do you remember Danielle Bergoli? She goes by Bad Baby.
Oh my God, I do remember her.
When she was on Dr. Phil.
Yes.
That's what I was doing.
Oh my gosh, was that her catchphase? Say it again.
Catch me outside. How about that?
Right. I was unable to identify without "Cash Me Outside."
Yeah, sorry.
You only did the truncated version. Yeah. God, I'm so upset to have missed out on such a wonderfully rich cultural reference.
Yeah. I thought I slipped it by you, but I guess not.
Kowalski from Nebraska. Will ESVN admit that Trump was right when he said the Panthers would win the Stanley Cup? I hope you read this with the same energy of the conservative.
Matt Binder had been following that quite closely. That since Trump tweeted,
I know
they lost 3 games in a row.
Yeah, it really was close to the Ted Cruz curse of what he the Astros, but he also cursed. Cursed someone else. He was at the Cowboys or the Texans. It was or something like that.
He was at another Texas area game, and I think that they did lose.
Yeah.
It might have been either. Also, could have been the Mavericks. It's one of the.
It was the Mavericks.
It was the Mavs. Yeah,
it was the Mavericks.
Yeah, it was the Mavs. Yeah.
Speaking of curses, though, I don't know how I didn't mention this. Somebody named Drake is not having a good 2024. He bet $500,000 on the Mavericks to win the championship,
and that's an immediate fade. You know when he makes a bet in a championship, you immediately fade that. You go against it. You go against it. You buy the dip immediately after Drake posts a huge bet on a team to win the championship.
And you know who he also bet to win the NHL championship? $500K, the Oilers. He is having a horrible year. Not that $1 million means anything to him. But
just even like for the reputation, like
I know, I know,
just brutal.
It's at it's at the lowest it possibly could be for Drake right now. Now from Trinidad, Emma, I agree with you on the JJ Redick segment. Congratulations to you, Bradley, on the side gig as the New York Knicks head coach. When will Emma Jordy Report crew be doing a pop culture show or segment? Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure.
Listen, hockey and basketball are over, so we will have some time.
Yes, I mean, I did mention Drake there.
But we will also, I wanted to flag, not just for the audience, but for my co-host as well, because I'm springing this on you. We will definitely talk about the Euros.
Yes.
In soccer, now that we are fully past the Stanley Cup and the NBA Finals. And that's and also the Olympics when that starts up again as well.
Right.
So we will have a few exciting more banner events until football returns.
Exactly. I forgot. That's why the WNBA season is longer than there's that gap, right? Because they're going to be playing for the Olympic team.
Oh yes.
It's like I was like, oh gosh, really? That it goes. I hadn't understood why it went that long.
They must have had to adjust the schedule, but just for Olympic.
Well, they do that they used to do that for the NHL when the short-sighted idiots last
no
season
pros
didn't
anymore.
no. You know what helps grow the game is the freaking Olympics.
Maybe people seeing good players play hockey.
I don't know if people have ever looked into Team USA, but for the NBA.
What was that movie called? Miracle?
Oh, that too. Well, those were college guys.
Oh,
so,
right. Sorry.
That actually they're probably like, we could do it again.
Yeah, right. What, there could be another Miracle on Ice.
Tater Tot, that's an incredibly specific dream, Bradley. I applaud it. I'm assuming this is the manatee thing. Kowalski from Nebraska. Bradley, I know a guy at a zoo. Can I get you that manatee now? Would the wife approve of it being in your home?
Yeah, that's fine. I think it would work.
Dan from Columbus. Can't wait for the future Netflix series about Bradley's manatee farm. I think Montana Manatee Man has a nice ring to it. Kowalski from Nebraska. Again, back in high school, I took a class called Decade of the 60s. And the instructor told us a little bit about how football became the most prominent sport in the country, mostly due to JFK. JFK wanted a sport that would be able to condition young men for military service, since he was afraid of the lack of farmers in the country. That would mean not having as good of a population to draft from, and for them to understand the regimentation of military service at a younger age. The federal government subsidized a lot of high school football infrastructure around the country. There are some interesting racial dynamics to the story as well, but already getting quite long. I should look into that, Kowalski. I did not even know that, but that's fascinating. Antifa Lockhart. McDavid losing, does that mean he leaves Edmonton? Be the Hossa to Bedard. Also, was the NHL selling NFTs? I didn't see that, but I don't think McDavid is leaving Edmonton right now. Maybe in the future, but he's not really that kind of guy to do that. Although he did say that about LeBron, and then he made a real show of things. Hank Aaron 715. Can we get a shofar for the fallen baseball legend Willie Mays, the 7th black player in the MLB, 4 years after reintegration? The Say Hey kid helped pave the way for the hundreds of black players who joined the MLB in the 50s, including one who would eventually break Babe Ruth's home run record, Hank Aaron, who called Mays the best player he played against and one of the greatest center fielders to ever live. Hank Aaron, this is the Emma shofar. No, Hank Aaron is the IMer. Oh. But for Willie Mays.
Emma.
I'm not confusing Hank Aaron with Willie Mays. You're concerned for me.
I was falsely accusing Emma of racism. My apologies.
Typical woke leftist.
Typical woke white straight man.
Yes, obviously. PETA the cat says Oilers should have pulled their goalie when they were 3 minutes left and they were pressing. By the time they pulled with 1 minute left, they were completely gassed. I don't necessarily know if I would have pulled the goaltender earlier, because the Oilers were pressing, but they needed a stoppage so they could call a timeout so McDavid could have rested, because it was that was not how they typically should have looked in that final stretch. And the final IM of the day. Dan from Columbus, the fourth unforgivable curse, the Ted Cruz curse. That's, I think, a Harry Potter reference. Typical millennials over here. All right, folks. We will see you next Monday. We'll be back on our regular schedule because no more hockey or basketball.
Yeah, we don't have any playoff series anymore to
to
adjust our schedules.
Yes. We will see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye.